Yeah,
correct?
we're all here. I had an
All
email
in
from
attendance.
Cheryl saying that the inspection for 350 Roseland Park Road didn't happen due to illness. It's been rescheduled to March 24th. That's Thomas Reddick.
Was that his address, Roseland Park Road?
Yep.
So Reddick inspection tomorrow.
No, 24th.
Oh, not till the 24th,
Yeah, it's really getting us up to the deadline there.
I guess. 3/24 inspection.
One year we tried to raise somebody's value. And we're told that when you raise somebody's value, they have to have, I don't know, 2 weeks notice or something to get back to you about it. And we didn't have 2 weeks, so we had to reverse our decision.
Really? Sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
Next time, next month, I suppose we'll start earlier. I didn't really want to start on the 1st of March. It seemed a little quick to me, but. And Noreen Stellick with her little plot across the road. I'm kind of waiting to see what the lawyer says about whether or not that has to be a separate plot or not.
Is this the town's lawyer?
Yeah, because Delia said
So it's
to
in his hands?
ask the attorney. Well, Crystal said she'd take it to him, so I'd assume.
So Stellick's case is going to town attorney.
Yeah. Just because if it doesn't have to be in a separate parcel, I would just put it at 0. And if it does, then I would put a small value on it. So personally.
The value that's on it works out to be not very much, but it's because it starts with the acreage.
Not if you divide it by or multiply it by 20 because it's a 20th of an acre.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, and it turns out to be a lot. That's what I was trying to get a little more information on how she got her number when she. Ron, did you read your emails today?
My wife twice went to her iPad,
Mhm.
which I'm using now, and didn't see any emails. Is that correct, Diane?
I didn't see any what?
Emails today
There were a lot of emails.
concerning me.
Yeah, different things.
Why didn't you show them to me? Late, it's her fault. It's her fault. Well, from now on, please show them to me. Okay? Thank you. Anyway, emails. What did I miss?
Well, I had emailed Emily asking her how she arrived at the value for the 20th of an acre. In particular, I was wondering about certain factors that she seemed to have applied. And she emailed her back and said a variety of things that you can read at your leisure, which came down to, I'm not going to tell you because you don't need to know.
Yeah, it was kind of a snarky email.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
Well, I wonder if the town attorney says it has to be a separate recorded parcel,
Mhm.
so it has a unique map book and parcel number,
Mhm.
does that really affect what happens?
I don't know. What do you think?
Well, my suspicion is that's what he's going to say, that you can't have a parcel that crosses a state highway and be the same parcel number.
Mhm.
And so I just wondered about if we just say, okay, we think that thing's worth $500 and be done with it.
Could, although if he said that it could be part of the same parcel, I would put it at 0.
Well, then we can wait and see.
Yeah, and we have to meet it next week anyway because of that inspection for Reddick.
Yep,
Yeah.
When is the 24th?
week from tonight.
Week from today, right?
Yeah, a week from today. Yeah.
I went back through the Witches Woods presentation
Mhm.
and actually looked up, they referred to the statute that established common interest organizations. Basically, it's the statute that established the law for co-ops, you know, a cooperative apartment building or a cooperative house or building or whatever. And they had a
Condos.
reference to that law in their presentation. And I'm not an attorney, but I don't think their reference applies. Because
What
the
were they
reference
trying to
that-
say from it? Yeah.
the thing they referred to, trying to get out from being taxed on their common areas, in my reading, seems to apply to something like a building where each apartment is a separate unit within the building.
Mhm.
And so the cooperative association gets a single bill for the whole building
Mhm.
and then parses it out to the members of the co-op. Well, in Witches Woods and in Bungee and Quasit, each of the members of those associations owns their plot of land and the buildings in
Mhm.
fee simple. So it doesn't,
Yep.
you know, it's a different situation.
Mm.
John, do you have that statute number?
Yeah, it's CIOA, which is Community Interest Ownership, something or other, 47-204. And I went to the website where the Connecticut General Assembly statutes are, and I just searched on that and it brought me to the right place.
I'm impressed. Not always easy to search there.
Has the question been posed to Emily as to why Bungee and Witches Woods and not the others?
No, I asked her whether she knew of any others. And she indicated she didn't.
She did not.
What I
These two were
remember.
being singled out.
Well, these two came to her attention for some reason. She said something, let's see.
I didn't think she actually answered that part of your question.
Here's what she said. I'm not sure why the lake properties were not taxed. It's a great question, but one that could only be answered by my predecessor. When I became aware of this issue, I was perplexed. Upon conducting some research, I found they have not been assessed since the 1980s. Somehow. 40 years ago, back when we likely had an, quote, elected board of assessors, unquote, they dropped off the grand list. However, now that we are aware of it, they needed to go back on the grand list. Unfortunately, errors of the past do occur. When they are discovered, it is our duty and obligation to correct them regardless of the history. I am not aware of any other properties that are not being assessed, or I would have added them as well. Although we do have 4,661 parcels in town, it's certainly possible we may find other errors in the future. It wasn't until I went looking for the value on the lake in response to a phone inquiry that I was alerted to it not being assessed in error. Somebody called her about something. And that's what got her started on this particular lake.
Well, and it's interesting that from what she said, these lakes weren't on the grand list at all. But in the case of Quasit Lake, it's on the list, but it has a value of 0.
Yeah, and it's hard to say for sure from her email. That is kind of what it sounds like. But,
Yep.
But what I actually got from her email, I got to thinking about why an elected board might decide not to tax the improvements, which includes the lake. Because on Quasit, they're quoted as improvements. And to me, actually, yeah, roads and a lake and a dam
Yep.
are improvements. And I thought, they probably thought that the town is getting a lot of value from all the housing that went up around these developments.
Yeah,
You know, 400
With
plus houses, all paying taxes, and decided, I could see an elected board, of course, she's kind of implying elected boards are clueless, but that an elected board might act in the interests of what they saw as the interests of their fellow townspeople as having paid enough in taxes for that area. I don't know. I could see that line of thinking. Now, on another sort of related subject, I messaged Bette Zimmerman and asked her if she knew who owned Roseland Lake. And her answer was that they have no idea. They've never been able to discover any specified owner of Roseland Lake. So we had some chat about whether you could put a houseboat and stake a claim. And it seemed the same with Muddy Brook and Black Pond, at least from the GIS, that they don't seem to be owned by anybody. The property lines run along the shore. Whereas Potter's Pond is private, and something else. Well, my pond actually shows up when you look at a Google map, and it's private.
how big is your pond?
Well, you know, it was a swamp in the late 60s, and then the beavers built the dam, and now it's, I don't know, 4 acres, 5 acres.
Wow.
It shows
Oh,
up on
it's
the
good.
map. It's not very
Big.
deep. Yeah, it's only, most of it's only 4 or 5 feet deep, but it's a big stretch of
Interesting.
water. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So yeah, and I saw something from the state about how lakes are regulated. There's somebody at the state that does, you know, you can ask them questions and they'll do research. Somebody asked them how lakes were regulated. And they too pretty much came to the conclusion that, you know, they're not regulated except for water quality and stuff. And that in terms of taxes, it would tend to depend on whether it was a private or a public and what the surrounding land use was, whether or not it would be taxed. So.
Well, and one of the other things I did was looked at all the different land use codes that Woodstock uses.
yeah.
You put your cursor over the little dot next to the land use code in Vision, it will give you the list.
Yeah.
And I was looking for one that might be better than vacant residential land for roads.
Yeah.
Well, there's a whole lot of them, but nothing struck my fancy. Well, then I thought I'd go look in Pomfret and see if maybe they had one. Well, theirs are all different. So Pomfret's Vision database has a 4-digit land use code, and they're all different from what Woodstock uses.
Interesting. Yeah, I believe it. I am getting the impression that the assessor has a lot of latitude in their job to.
Yep. Well, and for example, in Witch's Wood on the dam, that property is assessed as if it were vacant residential land.
Mhm.
And it seems to me that it ought to be assessed the same way the lake is, because the lake wouldn't be there without the dam.
Yeah.
But I don't think it abuts the lake parcel. I think the road is in between.
Because it runs along the top of the dam.
Road runs partway along the top of the dam. It doesn't go all the way.
Mhm.
I mean, you could drive a vehicle all the way to the spillway, but there's a barrier, so you can't, you can't just drive out there.
Mhm. So are you leaning towards granting or denying their appeal at this point?
For Witch's Woods?
Yeah, let's start with Witch's Woods, of which there are 5 actually.
Well, I think that property ought to be taxed, but I think it shouldn't be vacant residential land. I think we should find a cheaper, a lower assessed value.
You mean both the roads and the dam and the lake? I
Yep.
think they all should have some taxable value put
They
on them.
should all have some taxable value, but it ought to be lower than residential land.
Mhm. Uh-oh.
What?
Because I'm leaning towards putting it all at 0.
You're leading it towards all at 0?
To grant their appeals, yeah, yeah.
Well, Witches Woods didn't want 0 on anything except the roads,
All right, I'd have to review that again.
because they thought they ought to be taxed, but they wanted the swamp and ledge value, not the lake value.
It's interesting because I thought that was just part of their bigger argument. Let me look at the actual appeals. It's not like they're far away.
But I could be persuaded that I think it was Randy Chimura pointing out as part of the Witches Wood presentation that the Sachem's Head court case, she used the words gated community and said, well, we're not gated. Well, you're not gated. They're not gated, but they do have no trespass.
Yeah, they do have
private
the
road
signs
signs.
up there. No, their estimated value all the way through is 0. So if we grant it, it'll go to 0. And if we deny it, it'll stay as is, I guess, or we can do something in between.
But I thought the 2 parcels that make up the Witches Wood Lake, I thought they wanted to assign a value. Now I'm going to have to go back and look.
No, if you look at the actual application, appellant's estimated value is 0. Now their argument was, they gave a number of arguments, and I do remember one of their arguments was, this is definitely not tillable. If anything, you might want to look at the fact it used to be swamp. So they were just encouraging us to think about what kind of land it was. They weren't actually saying we want it to be valued as swamp. They were just saying it used to be swamp, so making it tillable is kind of silly.
Oh yeah, they do say 0.
The reason I'm leaning towards 0 is because there are other properties in town that are at 0 at the moment, because the state seems to be, because there is no such thing as 63L in the state recommended guidelines for open space,
Right.
which means that this has not been something that has been thought through by anybody at the state level. It seems to be kind of up to town by town. And indirectly, because of this argument that those properties create a lot of value for the town's tax base. And I don't feel like we need to throw on another minor amount over and above that value, but it's not, I don't know, that's a good argument. It just seems reasonable to me.
So you're doing more of a sort of general equity argument that the law may say one thing and we ought to tax every scrap of land there is, but because of the value they bring to the town in general, and if the lake wasn't there, house lots in that part of town wouldn't have the valuation they do, that it's appropriate
That's for
to
sure.
value the stray bits of land at 0.
Yeah, and the applicability of the co-op situation you described is that each of the apartments are taxed, but the lobby is not, kind of thing.
Oh, but actually the lobby is.
Is a separate part. So what part isn't taxed with the co-op?
No, the whole thing is taxed,
Yeah,
but you get a single bill for the whole building.
yeah.
And then the manager parses it out.
Oh, so that would be like Laurel Ridge,
Yep.
which is how they do it.
Yep.
Yeah, versus
Yep.
this is piece by piece by piece. Yep. Yeah.
Because like the guy that whose appeal we granted, he rents that plot. He doesn't own the plot, right?
The camper?
Laurel
The camper
Ridge. Yeah, he owns the improvements, but not the actual land underneath.
Yep. So he's leasing his lot where he can park the camper.
Yep. But also they combine all of the structures. This came up a lot because there's a woman whose husband loved to build, and he built a beautiful multi-room, lovely house in the middle of the woods in a nudist camp that she can't sell. And she really wants to get the price down on that. And she came to us a couple of years in a row. So, and the way it works is that house is swept up in the real property owned by Laurel Ridge for tax purposes, even though she has to pay the taxes on it. So it's all a little obscure, but basically it meant that Laurel Ridge had to be the one to appeal, not her personally, because they're the ones that get the tax bill. So, yeah, I'm surprised we didn't hear from them this year. I guess they gave up. Another large taxpayer in town. No, the question of whether every scrap of land has to be taxed, I think, is a little bit town by town based, you know?
Mhm.
And it was part of their argument that a lot of the value of these things are imputed to the value of the houses, i.e., you know, caught up in the value of the houses. When you buy your house, you get a road and a lake kind of thing,
Yep.
you know? Which is
Well, there
a
is
bad
an imputed
argument.
value for any of the houses, even if you're not lakefront, that you have the use of the beach and the clubhouse or whatever, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So. And there's the fact there's a revale coming up. I feel like this may be worked over a bit more in the years to, you know, in the next few years, as they look at the entire town. And maybe they can get the state to weigh in. You know, I like those recommendations that come from the state as to how to value the open space,
Yep.
because that means somebody at the state level is trying to think about it on a larger scale, you know.
Well, it
Yeah,
is
obviously-
interesting that the state doesn't assign a value to that, as you pointed out, to the lake. It only has to different kinds of agricultural land, tillable, AB, whatever, and then forest land, and then open space.
Open space always comes in on one of the other categories. So it's never just open space, $100. It's open space pasture, and then it's valued the same as though it was agricultural pasture.
Yep.
Yeah. So. And somebody
Well,
could
that's, I mean, I
spend.
guess originally that was a thing driven by a desire to help farmers.
Oh, yeah, it's an attempt to make sure land isn't sold because of taxes.
Yep.
You know, because of the high tax value when it's actually being kept open. It's a compromise between a zoning situation where you cannot sell it out of agricultural usage and a tax break where you can pay the taxes back and get on with your life if you want to sell it to a developer. Yeah. So anyway.
Tractor trailer operators are some of the most skilled drivers in the country. Unfortunately,
I guess I could be persuaded that the value of the roads and these the back of the dam and so on is zero, because the individual house lots are more valuable than they would otherwise be. And certainly the concentration of improvements is much higher in those communities than it is elsewhere in Woodstock. So you get more improvement per acre, so to speak, in those two communities than you do up and down Prospect Street.
Yeah. Yeah, you certainly get a lot of taxes per acre there. You know.
Of course, you have a lot of kids too, and so the school budget gets.
I don't know, we'd have to figure all that out, right? Yeah, otherwise, if you want, just go through the 5 and make up a schedule of what you'd consider a reasonable value to be, and then we can mull that over.
Are we gonna handle Bungie the same way?
Yeah, Bungay is just the roads.
Yeah, I wouldn't handle, they should be, I think all of there are 3, as near as I can tell, there are 3 special tax districts that involve lakes in Woodstock: the Witches Wood, Bungay, and Quasit. And all of them have similar characteristics. There's some private roads, there's the lake itself, there's a couple of access points to the lake, and there's a dam. And in all of those cases, as you're pointing out, the houses around those lakes are valued at a higher rate than that same house would be if it were sitting on Prospect Street or on English Neighborhood Road. So that the town gets some value from that being there. I think I'm talking myself into agreeing with the appeal.
Well, you can see that aspect of it. I mean, otherwise, you just think about the dam and what a dam costs. I mean, in
Well, and
permits.
as Witches Wood guys are pointing out, there's a lot of, they have to, now that the state's not doing it anymore, they have to hire an engineer to come inspect it every so often.
Yeah, and if you wanted to build it from scratch, it'd be a huge amount of money. So if you're actually going to put a value on it as a built structure, you're talking a lot more than like $1,000. You're talking
Oh, yeah.
about, you know,
Oh, yeah.
more like $100,000.
Multiple six figures.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and that's why they
So
knocked
it's
the
like-
dam down in East Woodstock. Somebody decided that it had to be repaired and
Yeah.
nobody wanted to pay for repairing it. And they were
And
worried
now
it
it's
would
beautiful
wash
dam.
out. Well, then it took them weeks to knock it down because it didn't want to come
He
down.
wasn't interested in coming down, yeah. Kind of sad that it was a nice dam.
Well, I can remember as a kid, my dad with some buddies opening the gate to draw the water level down and then going in behind the dam with leaves and rocks and dirt to patch the holes.
Yeah, that works. I don't know whose dad's stream that would get hurt if it broke, but probably somebody. That Rosen,
Well,
Roseland
during the
Lake.
55 flood, Stuart and now I've lost her name, May, lives across the street from the church. They lost a whole Quonset hut full of chickens. They had a big long chicken coop alongside Muddy Brook downstream of the dam. Now the dam didn't go out. It was just so much water coming over it that
Yeah.
floodplain flooded.
Carried it off. Yeah, been a
Sally, there
while.
we go, Sally Mae.
Been a while since we had a bad
That's the
flood.
first I've ever heard any damage from the 55 flood in Woodstock.
Well, the dam didn't fail. It was still there.
And the chickens didn't have much of a voice, so.
Yep. Well, we had water running down our driveway because the pond overflowed.
Yep. I know, my brother remembers that. What he remembers is the cornfield. He went out during the eye and all the corn was lying on its side, and then the eye passed. And at the end of the storm, he went out and all the corn was lying the other direction.
Well, I guess because the inspection hasn't happened and we're still chewing around the Witch's Wood and Bungay, there isn't anything else we can do tonight, is there?
Nope. I did send out 3 letters today. I certified them to the 3 people we've decided on. And Death Battle.
Oh, and I went out to the Connecticut Association of Assessors
Mhm.
website and decided I was curious enough about all this, I would join that august organization. So I have applied for membership.
Yeah. Who knows what you'll find under the stones there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I think I have a copy of the assessor's handbook from them somewhere. But according to Emily, we shouldn't worry about any of that. We should just focus on the argument presented and its merits. But I don't know, that's not how my brain works, but
Nope.
I tend to like to have the bigger picture. All right, well, you want to cancel tomorrow night then?
Have we come to a conclusion on the 2 lakes? As far as the appeal acceptance?
Let me chew on that a little longer.
That's fine.
Should we set, if we're going to cancel tomorrow, should we set a meeting for like Thursday, the 25th to finish up?
Let me see, did she said what time on the 24th? Cheryl. Change to the 24th, so we don't know what time. Okay, let's do Thursday, the 25th. Is that good with you, Ron?
Very good.
Yep. Okey dokey.
So whoever's playing host today, do we need to get them to cancel tomorrow and set up the Zoom for Thursday, the 25th?
Hey, it's Anthony here. I can easily
Anthony.
cancel that, and then next Thursday, 5:30. Is that what time you're thinking?
6.
6,
Six.
unless John has a meeting. You got a
No,
meeting,
no,
John?
6 o'clock is fine.
Yeah, 6 then.
All right, I can schedule that and send that out tomorrow morning.
That's great.
Great. Thank you so much, Anthony.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, have a good night, everybody. Thanks for
We
your
You
help.
adjourn.
too.
Okay, bye.
Good night.